Replicants are bioengineered humans. They were designed by the Tyrell Corporation to be the ideal slaves. Their manufacture was cut short due to violent rebellions. This led to Tyrell Corporation going bankrupt. In the 2020s, Wallace, who is a huge industrialist, went on to acquire the remains of the Tyrell Corporation. He created new replicants who obey, rather than rebel. The old replicants, Nexus 8 seconds, and are being hunted down and retired. The hunters are known as Blade Runners. Officer K, who is one of the Blade Runners, is traveling to retire Morton, who is one of the oldest rebellious replicants. Morton has been farming in his land for many years. Officer K enters his house, and Morton meets him there. Officer K agrees to take Morton to the LAPD headquarters, instead of retiring him in his own home. Unwilling to get taken out, Morton attacks Officer K, but to no avail. Officer K has the upper hand, and puts him down for good. But before he is retired, Morton lets Officer K know something important. The new replicants don't know what it used to be like in the past, during the rebellions. They don't know how good they have it now, and how badly they were mistreated before. Officer K informs Madam Joshi that he has retired Morton. Joshi asks Officer K to come back to the headquarters. Before he can leave, Officer K notices a little flower by the tree. He commands his hovering drone to take an underground scan. Officer K finds out that there's a box buried inside the ground. Every Blade Runner has to go through a post-traumatic baseline test after a mission. If the Blade Runners fail, they are deemed rebellious replicants and are retired within the next few days. Officer K goes back to his apartment, where he finds comfort in his holographic AI girlfriend, Joy. Officer K surprises Joy with an emanator. It makes her no longer dependent on the machine fixed in Officer K's apartment, which previously confined her to the space. Joy can now move wherever she likes. Officer K treats Joy like a real human being, rather than an AI program. Back at the headquarters, the team finds out that the box buried in the ground contains the bones of a pregnant woman. When Officer K scans the bones, he finds a serial number imprinted on one of them. A serial number is assigned to every single replicant. Joshi tells Officer K that it is impossible for a replicant to reproduce. If the world finds out that replicants have the ability of reproduction, then it could lead to a deadly war between the replicants and humans. Joshi orders Officer K to vanish every single trace of the pregnant woman and child, if they're alive. Officer K goes to Wallace's headquarters to get more information about the pregnant woman. An employee finds out that the woman has been dead for a while. The employee and Officer K go to the records room to find the woman's data. Before the employee can proceed, Wallace's closest employee, Love, arrives and decides to help Officer K from there. Love and Officer K process the data and find a recording of the deceased woman. The name of the woman was Rachel, and she was indeed a replicant. Officer K suspects that Rachel had a romantic relationship with one of the oldest Blade Runners, Rick. Love talks to Wallace, who is currently working on a brand new replicant. After learning that there's a child of a replicant out there, Wallace orders Love to bring Rachel's remains and find the child. Wallace intends to use them to change the course of the world. While Officer K is out in the city, an anonymous woman orders 3 girls to find out everything Officer K knows. While Officer K doesn't pay much attention to them at first, his attraction to one of them grows. But he is dedicated to his mission and goes to Morton's home to find out more about Rachel. He finds an old picture inside a piano, and Officer K assumes that it's Rachel's photo. He goes near the tree and finds a marking that reads 6/10/21. It brings up an old memory, and he sets the house on fire before leaving. Meanwhile, Love has entered the LAPD headquarters and is stealing Rachel's remains. One of the team members tries to stop Love, who ends up putting him down for good. Officer K heads back to his apartment and finds Joshi, who breaks the news of Rachel's remains being stolen. Both of them sit down for a drink, and Joshi asks Officer K to tell her one of his past memories. Officer K recalls that when he was a kid, he used to be at an orphanage and had a small, wooden horse toy. The rest of the orphanage boys used to chase him for the toy, so he ended up putting it in a dark furnace, where no one could ever find it. Officer K heads back to the headquarters. In the DNA archive room, he does further research. He tries to find records of birth anomalies that took place on 6/10/21. As Officer K waits for the results, he spends some time with Joy. When the results arrive, he is stunned to find out that there were 2 children born on that day, with identical DNA. Officer K and Joy travel to the orphanage to find out more, but during their travel, they are attacked. Before the attackers can fatally wound them, Love, who is following Officer K, drops missiles on them and saves his life. Officer K enters the orphanage, but the person in charge denies keeping any past records. When Officer K threatens him, the worker decides to show Officer K the old record books. For a small moment, Officer K is haunted by the place where he spent much of his life as a child. They go through the record books. To their surprise, the data under the date 6/10/21 has been ripped out from the book. Puzzled and slightly terrified, Officer K goes to the furnace where he hid his horse toy. Much to his surprise, it is there, even after all those years. Joy, on the other hand, is shocked. The toy being there means that the memory is real. Officer K might actually be a human and not a replicant, since the memories that are implanted in a replicant are always false. Joy suggests that Officer K's real name might be Joe. Officer K goes to meet Dr. Anna, who is responsible for creating and implanting memories in replicants. Dr. Anna tells Officer K about her life. She was found when she was just a child and was put in a lab to create memories for the rest of her life. Dr. Anna creates a memory in front of him. He shows Dr. Anna his memory, and she is moved to tears when she realizes that it is real. Officer K is deeply disturbed. He now suspects himself to be Rachel's child, the very same child he's been instructed to find and eliminate. Officer K is called to the LAPD headquarters immediately. Now unstable from the recent discovery, he fails the post-traumatic baseline test and is labeled as a rogue replicant. Joshi scolds him for taking too long to vanish the evidence of Rachel's existence. Officer K lies to her about removing every trace of Rachel and her child. Now a rogue, the Blade Runners will be after him. Joshi warns him that she can't protect him for much longer. Joy brings in one of the girls Officer K met earlier. Joy integrates herself with that girl so that she can get romantic with him. This way, she can find out if Officer K is human. Officer K tries to leave the city and find Rick. He wants to ask him about Rachel. A local scientist is able to locate the origins of the toy, and the information gives Officer K some clues about Rick's whereabouts. Meanwhile, he destroys Joy's tracking device. Love can't follow him anymore. Love goes to Joshi and tries to elicit information about where he is. When Joshi refuses to say anything, Love puts her to rest in a fit of anger. Love uses Joshi's system to find him. Meanwhile, he is currently in a place with dangerously high radiation levels. He comes across Rick, who refuses to answer his questions about Rachel. Rick beats him up, but Officer K tries to resist. When Rick isn't able to put Officer K down, he gives in and decides to talk with him. Rick is initially hesitant to answer questions, but admits that he had a child with Rachel. He removed the traces and identity of the child. This way, no one can find the child and use them for inappropriate means. Love arrives with several men, and she beats up Rick and Officer K. She also destroys Joy for good. She abandons Officer K and takes Rick with her. Officer K is found and taken care of by the woman that he was getting close to. Several more rebellious replicants arrive. The leader of the rebellious replicants, Freysa, says that she helped deliver Rachel's child. When told that Rachel had a daughter instead of a son, Officer K is heartbroken to learn that he isn't Rachel's child. Suddenly, he realizes that Dr. Anna is Rachel and Rick's daughter. Freysa advises Officer K to free Rick. Otherwise, Wallace will use his child for nefarious means. Wallace meets Rick, and he asks Rick where he might have left his child. Rick refuses to answer his question. Wallace decides to play mind games and brings out a robotic version of a young Rachel. At first, Rick falls for it, but he eventually realizes that the robot doesn't fully resemble Rachel. Wallace decides to keep Rick until he tells him where his child is. While Rick is being taken away, Officer K tries to free him. Officer K takes down many of Wallace's personnel, as well as Love's flying vehicle. Love decides to engage in battle with Officer K and is prepared to end him for good. For the most part, Love is able to overcome Officer K's offense. Officer K fights back, but he's no match for Love's combat skills. The flying vehicle has fallen near a body of water, and Rick is now at risk of drowning. Officer K tries to take Love out and save Rick, but she gets the final shot. As she goes to free Rick and save him from drowning, a severely injured Officer K sneaks up from behind and successfully terminates her. Officer K frees Rick, who was about to drown. Both of them swim to save themselves. When Rick asks him why he saved him, Officer K explains that he wants him to meet his daughter. Officer K takes Rick to Dr. Anna's lab and hands him the horse toy, which he now knows belongs to Dr. Anna. Officer K, who is badly wounded, is aware that his time has come to a close. He decides to lay down and feel the snowfall one last time, in peace. For the first time in his life, Rick feels the joy of seeing his daughter.